Suprabhat, good morning, namaste. Okay, I would like to begin this presentation by inviting all of you where we can take the first 30 seconds to close our eyes and just be grateful to the ones because of whom you are able to attend this conference today. So let us close our eyes. Remember the ones who helped you, supported you, so that you could come here today and be a part of this beautiful conference. Pay your gratitude. Tell them thank you. Could be your friends, family, mentors, colleagues, ex-bosses, and most importantly, your own self. Yes. Thank you very much for helping me do this. I am Chandni Ravani, and as he has already mentioned about me, I lead learning and organizational development at Euphoria Consulting, where we create transformative OD interventions and capability building programs for our client organizations. Originally, I'm a farmer from Gujarat, and I take pride in introducing myself. I'm a farmer turned professional who's here today to present a new idea on the topic, bringing perpetual fluidity in organizational development. What we also do for our clients is, with my background, which is more than 15 years now in HR, a background in behavioral science and also at Harvard, it helps me design OD interventions focusing on business transformation, enhancing employee value proposition, leadership effectiveness, and also giving a new outlook to the cultural fabric of the organization. What we also do with our clients is that we align the people's strategies with the business goal, ensuring long-term success. What we will be covering in the next 25 or 20 minutes from now is the present context. Also, why in the present context, despite putting so much of energy, efforts, and time, as well as a lot of value investment, the OD interventions are failing today. Moving on from there, we will then share about what is the need for this new model in OD, how is it different from the traditional OD approach, what are the ways in which and where all have we used this particular model. We will be sharing that through two of the case studies, which are also our success stories at Euphoria Consulting. So before I begin to set the context and I entered this room, my founder's son, he told me that, hey Chandni, you know VUCA is outdated now, right? How many of you know what is the latest after VUCA today? Perfect, Bani. We are living in a time which is brittle, full of turbulence. It is anxious, non-linear, and full of chaos. This is the reality of today. In these times of turbulence and volatility, what we are also doing is that we are trying to fix today's problems with yesterday's solutions. And that is where we are literally rope walking. To all my friends, colleagues, and the entire HR fraternity who's present here today, as rightly pointed out by Peter Drucker, the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence itself. It is the way we are looking at the problems of today through the approaches from yesterday. And that is why most of the OD interventions fail. So we usually give this example that initially when an intervention starts off, there is a lot of sizzle in the beginning. And too soon, too fast, it just fizzles out. So what are some of the key reasons for the OD interventions to fail. The most important being misalignment with the business goals. Also, leadership team not taking equal ownership or participation or support in the OD process. There is also an inability to showcase impact. You run the intervention, you go through various phases, however, you fail to measure the impact of the intervention that you've run through in a client organization. There is also a disconnect with the existing culture. Maybe what you're proposing for the client does not match with the culture of the organization. And to further support all of these, I would like to share 2 real-life examples just to help you all to relate to these. So if we take example of General Motors in 2008, it went bankrupt, and before it received the government bailout, it had tried multiple OD interventions, but all of them failed because GM's culture was resistant to change, especially moving away from the older ways, the older patterns of working, and adapting to the new. Likewise, when companies try to do too many interventions at one go, that is what happened with McDonald's. McDonald's in 2015, they tried to do many OD interventions altogether, from global restructuring, menu innovation, employee engagement, culture building. And what was the impact of it? The impact of it was that it left not just their own employees confused, but also the customers regarding what is the image, brand image that McDonald's is now trying to create. So these are some of the common pitfalls or the reasons why OD interventions fail. And while these are some of the internal choice-making decisions of an organization, on top of these, we have these external factors on which we have very minimum or almost no control, marked by market dynamics, which are constantly changing, employee expectations, ever evolving, and technological disruptions. So when we meet a lot of our clients, the MDs, CXOs, CEOs, they usually tell us that today's problems are so complex that by the time we arrive at the solution, the problem statement itself has changed. And so the solution is completely obsolete or outdated in today's context. And this, I look at it as an opportunity, as an OD professional and protagonist of change. So the opportunity here is to move slightly away from the traditional OD approach and adopt a more fluid approach called Perpetual Fluidity, which is a dynamic process or a system that continuously evolves, responds, and adapts to the present context and is not married to a particular process, system, or the people part of the organization. How it is different from the traditional OD approach, I would like to state an example over here. Let's say there's an OD intervention plan of 1 to 2 years to address the communication challenges and also to improve collaboration across teams in an organization. After the end of 2 years, you measure the impact and the intervention stops. What Perpetual OD focuses on is that there must be a rolling change process, continuously evolving and assessing what is the need of the hour, continuous feedback loops, and ever-evolving workplace environment every quarter. The way it is different from the traditional OD approach is, in the traditional approach, change was looked at as a very planned and a structured approach with an end goal in mind. What Perpetual Fluidity focuses is that while the scope of the intervention is decided, we do not freeze on the end goal, we let it evolve. And hence, it is a continuous, ongoing, and adaptive process. The focus in traditional OD practice was on stable, hierarchy-based structures, whereas here in the Perpetual Fluidity model, we encourage a more fluid, decentralized, and adaptive structures as well as decision-making. The role of leaders also changes in both these approaches. In the traditional approach, leaders were more as, the ones who give direction or they direct the transformation. However, in the perpetual fluidity approach, leaders play more of a role of a facilitator, and they guide the change process as well as also role model the change process. So the leader's role becomes very, very important here. The data and feedback in the traditional practice was collected periodically after interventions. However, in the perpetual fluid model, there is a continuous data collection, and the decision making is highly data driven. In terms of flexibility, the perpetual fluid model is highly flexible and adaptable to change depending upon what emerges in the here and now context of the organization. And success measurement, initially we used to have predefined outcomes which were usually measured after the intervention. In the fluid model, what we are proposing is there has to be an ongoing improvement which has to be measured continuously. So what is this perpetual fluid framework that Euphoria Consulting has come up with? And how are we using this model with our client organizations and have also generated success stories for them? So now we are moving to the framework of the perpetual OD as well as the application part of it. Okay. So our work involves a lot of sensing, right? Because we are the ones who deal with people, part of the organization. So the first phase of this particular approach is called the pulse phase. In this phase, through a data-driven diagnostic study, we identify what is the organizational reality of the client in today's context. What are the key challenges they are facing? What is the need of the hour? What are some repetitive patterns that we see in the organization? And what we do in this particular phase is that we don't decide upon the end goal. We decide the scope of the intervention, but we keep the process so fluid and the intervention so fluid that it can take any shape and form in the coming months. In this particular phase, what becomes very, very important is a background in behavioral sciences. And that is where our expertise comes. So we at Euphoria Consulting have a background in behavioral sciences because this particular phase is a phase of self-reflection, awareness, reality check, and is also a phase of acceptance for the need of change. From here on, we move on to phase 2, which is the adapt phase. This is a phase of adaptation and responsiveness. In this particular phase, what is more important is the commitment to action of all the stakeholders. Okay? How ready you are to change, how willing you are to commit to the new change that is required. And that marks the adaptation phase. The third phase is the evolve phase. Now, this phase also largely depends upon phase 2, because the action initiatives taken or not taken in the phase 2 will determine how this particular model evolves. However, as organizations evolve, the pulse of change is in motion, avoiding stagnation, thereby bringing in perpetual fluidity. Now let us see how we used this particular model with 2 of our clients. One is from the manufacturing sector, and another is a largest fintech company of the country. So in the first one, the rationale of the case study stands at that it's a promoter-owned company having a joint venture with a European MNC in the manufacturing sector, transitioning to a professionally management team. The strength of the client organization stands at 900 employees across 4 locations, 1 head office, and it also holds a headquarters in Europe. The focus areas which we identified during the pulse phase, as per our model, were to focus on the decision making, also to bring in more of capability and culture building within the organization. We had to work on improving the communication flow across all the levels of the pyramid. And last but not the least, we also had to enhance the sense of belongingness, which was initially more departmental or functional, and we had to make them own the entire change process. So through the fluidity model of OD, we brought in a certain changes. So 1/4 of the time of the entire intervention went in buying the consensus from all the stakeholders of the organization. Now this stage is very, very important because you are not just dictating the change, but you're making them participate in the change process and automatically take the ownership of the change. And that is very, very important. The next thing we did was, it was designed in a manner that we did not restrict ourselves only to the top 5 leaders. We asked the frontline team to lead and own the entire change process, and they further cascaded it down to the bottom of the pyramid. What we also did in the intervention was about 8 months into the intervention, there was an uncertainty. What happened is a new equity partner came in, and the whole transition process of the new joint venture sailed smoothly because the organization was able to absorb the expectations of the new partner. Because we had already started working on the culture, the capability, and the decision-making in the organization. The plant productivity team started getting acquainted with the automated plant operations, and there is a continuous skill development as well as capability building programs run in the organization. Every 4 months, we check the pulse if a particular realignment in a specific area is needed, and that is how we evolved the entire organization. The second case study about which I would like to share, and this is very close to our hearts at Euphoria Consulting and also marks one of our major success stories in the industry, is about the largest fintech company with a very highly regulated environment who wanted to transition to a digital workplace. Now imagine all of this was happening during the COVID scenario, and the way we would have maneuvered this entire assignment is in itself an exploration of its own. Now in the 36-month intervention life cycle, 1/4 of the time, the first 10 months was spent on securing consensus from all the stakeholders, including the regulators, the board members, employees, the channel partners, as well as the customers. Every 4 months, again, over here, we constantly adopted and evolved to what are the new things that we need to realign with the organizational strategy or the leadership approaches. We had to work with all the employees of the organization to inculcate a digital mindset. So you imagine the amount of anxiety and fear the employees would have in their mind and heart when we talk about digitalization way back, about 4 to 5 years back. So we had to inculcate all of those in our coaching dialogues, in our capability building programs, and that is how we were able to provide a safe environment, a safe work environment, mentally also to the employees. The intervention during the course also broke the organization structure, and we kept it so fluid that the board was able to realign the structure across the 20 months to match the growth momentum to the 4x scalability. To ensure the future talent pool, what we also did was we divided the headquarters between 2 locations, Mumbai and Bangalore. And eventually, at the end of the intervention, they were able to transit and engage majority of the workforce into the new roles with as less friction as possible. Now, if we were to divide these case studies into the pulse phase, the adapt phase, and the evolve phase, all of the interventions that we run are applicable in the linear models, in the binary models, as well as in circular models. And this marks the success stories through this approach that we have created in the world of OD with most of our client organizations. So, to conclude with, what I would like to focus on is that the new model, the perpetual fluid model, most importantly focuses on uncovering your talent's potential all the time. You're pushing them out of their comfort zone. You're building opportunities for learning and development for them. You're constantly monitoring their progress and also constantly realigning. Another is an agile response to change. This is very, very important because the entire model, the way it is kept fluid, it focuses on adaptability, agility, which is nothing but the speed of action with which you as well as the other stakeholders commit to take that action, and also a lot of sensitivity. The third thing would be empowering self-sustainability. Again, very, very important because the entire ownership of the change process is participative and also passed on to your employees. And that's where you make this model makes the organizations self-sustainable in the long run. And last but not the least, the show must go on because we wish to make change itself as the pulse of the client organization. That's about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. Can you give you again a round of applause? This was a very powerful, well-detailed presentation. Maybe before you go, I would like to give to the panel just one or two people who want to comment something before I also give my remarks on her powerful presentation. Anyone who wants to comment something on Perpetual Fluidity Framework. This was a powerful presentation, guys. Anyone to comment? You know what? I normally ask people or raise people's hands on their behalf so that we see that learning did take place. Anyone to comment?
Really good presentation. I was curious. I think OD is quite important in organizations. You have mentioned the fact that change is one of the things that people fear the most. So how have you felt the process of helping people through the change so that they can adopt this new mindset?
I'm also a student of psychology at Harvard University, Boston. That's where our background in behavioral sciences becomes very, very important. Because in the pulse phase, which is the sensing phase, you actually sense the energy of the organization, right? And this is more so, this particular model also works with the entire energy transformation of the client organization. So the way we go about with dealing, with the fear that employee hold is, first of all, to make them aware of that this fear is real. Let us accept it. And each one of us is sailing in the same boat. Once the acceptance of this particular fact comes in, we then handhold them through our coaching as well as capability building programs of how to maneuver the change. What is the support that I need if I were to sail through smoothly through this change with as less friction as possible? I would not say that it is a very rosy picture out there, to be very honest, because change itself is a very, very painful process, right? But we only look at two things. Are you ready to commit the time? And are you ready to commit the energy that you need? And that's how the interventions are designed. Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was very powerful. Maybe before you go, I would also like to give a comment on the Perpetual OD framework. Let me shake your hands. This was very powerful. The powers adapt and evolve. So what does it mean to us? I was thinking that I feel we also need skills that are related to the ability to sense. Sensing is not something that can be done by everyone. It's a skill that needs to be acquired in organizations. And that skill, I feel, it can only be acquired by good researchers. You cannot have the ability to sense if you're not a good researcher. You need to know what's happening in other countries. You need to know what's happening in other regions so that you can have that skill. And it's very tacit, believe me. Adapt. We also need skills, the flexibility skills. You can't implement the Perpetual model if you are not able to be flexible, or if you're not flexible. The ability to be fluid, the ability to change, and the ability to take action. I liked what he said when he said flexibility, adapt, and actions works hand in glove. Let me leave these words with the people that action speaks louder than words, right? Let's all together say this. Action speaks louder than words. Action speaks louder than words. But today, I would like to say that results speaks louder than actions. So results speaks louder than? Results speaks louder than? Yes. Why I said results speaks rather than actions. I'm not simply saying actions are not important, but she has given us the case studies of how they've implemented the Perpetual OD framework, and it has worked. Can you clap hands for her as she sits down? Thank you very much. This was a powerful presentation. Thank you. Namaste.